The gray clouds hung low over the Montana Research Facility as Dr. James Miller adjusted his new atmospheric scanner for the fifth time that morning. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, forgotten on the metal desk beside stacks of data printouts. The device, his life's work, was meant to study unusual weather patterns. Instead, it was about to change humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. "This can't be right," he muttered, tapping the glass screen. The reading showed a consistent pattern that shouldn't exist, a perfect geometric shape extending far beyond Earth's atmosphere. At first, he thought it was an equipment malfunction, but 3 separate calibrations showed the same results. The pattern wrapped around the Earth like a massive bubble, extending past the Moon's orbit. It was invisible to the naked eye, and had somehow remained undetected by conventional instruments for centuries. But Dr. Miller's quantum-sensitive equipment could see it clearly, a barrier of pure energy, artificially created and impossibly old. He reached for the phone with trembling hands and dialed the facility director's number. Within hours, the quiet research station transformed into a hub of activity. Military vehicles rolled in, their tires crunching on the gravel as teams of scientists and government officials poured into the main laboratory. "Show us again," General Roberts demanded, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the main screen. Dr. Miller pulled up the 3-dimensional model, showing the perfect sphere that enclosed their solar system. "The barrier extends approximately 2.8 astronomical units from Earth," Dr. Miller explained, his voice steady despite his excitement. "It's made of energy we've never seen before, operating on principles that defy our current understanding of physics." As teams worldwide began checking their own instruments with similar quantum-sensitive modifications, confirmations started pouring in. The Chinese Space Agency found it, then the Europeans, then the Russians. The barrier was real, and it had been there all along. But that was just the beginning. 3 days after the discovery, the first artifact activated. In the basement of the British Museum, a stone tablet that had puzzled archaeologists for decades suddenly began to glow. Similar objects lit up in museums and dig sites across the globe. Pieces of technology so advanced they had been mistaken for simple decorative objects. Dr. Miller was called to London to examine the tablet. As he stood before the glowing stone, his scanner picked up the same energy signature as the barrier. "They're connected," he realized. "These artifacts and the barrier, they're made by the same beings." The tablet's surface shifted, revealing symbols that moved like liquid mercury. Dr. Linda Parker, the museum's lead archaeologist, worked alongside linguists and cryptographers to decipher the message. It was unlike any language ever seen on Earth, yet somehow familiar. "It's a warning," Dr. Parker announced one rainy evening, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "No, more than that. It's a record. Someone wanted us to know why they built the barrier." The news spread across the globe like wildfire. Humanity had never been alone. More importantly, they had been trapped inside an enormous cage for thousands of years. But why? As governments scrambled to respond to the revelation, more artifacts activated. Each one provided another piece of the puzzle, another fragment of a message left behind by beings who called themselves the Guardians. Dr. Miller stood at his window late that night, staring at the stars with new eyes. The barrier was invisible to human sight, but now that he knew it was there, he could almost feel it, a weight pressing down from above, a cage that had defined humanity's limits for their entire history. His phone buzzed. Another artifact had activated, this time in Egypt. As he packed his bag for yet another flight, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Guardians had built this barrier for a reason, and somehow he knew that when they discovered that reason, nothing would ever be the same. What they didn't know yet was that the barrier hadn't been built to protect humanity. The truth was far more terrifying, and it was about to change everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. The halls of the United Nations fell silent as Dr. Miller and Dr. Parker presented their findings. The artifacts had finally revealed their full message, and it was nothing like what anyone had expected. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Parker began, her voice echoing through the chamber, "we've decoded the Guardian's message. I warn you, what we've discovered will change our understanding of humanity's place in the universe." The holographic display behind her flickered to life, showing translations of the ancient text. The message was clear, brutal, and terrifying. "The barrier wasn't built to protect us," Dr. Miller continued, his face grim. "It was built to protect them from us. The Guardians feared humanity, not because of what we were, but because of what we would become." The room erupted in whispers and murmurs. Ambassador Thomas from Britain stood up, his face pale. "Are you saying these Guardians imprisoned our entire species?" "Yes," Dr. Parker answered, "but there's more. The Guardians were the dominant species in the galaxy 50,000 years ago. Their civilization spanned thousands of star systems. They had achieved what they thought was the peak of evolution. Then their scientists discovered something that terrified them." The next slide showed complex genetic patterns. "They found a pattern in human DNA," Dr. Miller explained. "A pattern that suggested humanity was evolving faster than any species they'd ever encountered. Their predictions showed that if left unchecked, humans would surpass their level of advancement within a mere 10,000 years. The room grew colder as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't been contained for their protection. They had been caged like animals because an advanced civilization had been afraid of them. "The artifacts activate in sequence," Dr. Parker continued. "Each one reveals more of the story. The Guardians saw potential in humanity that frightened them. They saw our adaptability, our creativity, our drive to survive and evolve. Where they had reached stability, we kept changing. Where they had found contentment, we always sought more." The final images showed star maps marking thousands of worlds. "These are other barriers," Dr. Miller said quietly. "We're not the only ones they imprisoned. Any species that showed similar potential was isolated, trapped on their homeworlds." General Roberts stepped forward. "Can we break it?" he asked, his voice hard with suppressed anger. Dr. Miller nodded slowly. "The artifacts aren't just message carriers. They're tools, left behind by a small group of Guardians who disagreed with the imprisonment. They believed it was wrong to cage developing species. These artifacts contain information about the barrier's weaknesses." The news spread across Earth like a tidal wave. Humanity had been judged, feared, and imprisoned before they'd even developed writing. The revelation sparked something deep in the human spirit, not just anger, but determination. In labs across the world, scientists began studying the artifacts with renewed purpose. The barrier that had caged them for so long might have weaknesses, but finding them would require technology humanity hadn't yet developed. "There's one more thing," Dr. Parker announced as the session was ending. The last activated artifact contained a warning. "The Guardians may be gone, but their descendants still watch the barriers. If we try to break free, they'll come to stop us." The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the silence of shock or fear. It was the silence of determination, of a species that had just discovered they were considered too dangerous to roam free among the stars. As the meeting ended, Dr. Miller looked out the window at the New York skyline. Somewhere above those gleaming towers, an invisible wall separated humanity from their destiny. But now they knew it was there. And if there was one thing the Guardians had been right about, it was humanity's determination to break any chains that bound them. The message had been decoded, but this was just the beginning. The real question wasn't whether humanity would break free, but what they would do once they did. The first signs came from deep space monitoring stations across Earth. Massive objects were approaching the solar system, their energy signatures unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They moved with purpose, decelerating as they neared the barrier's outer edge. In NASA's control room, technicians watched in stunned silence as the objects resolved into clear images. Ships, hundreds of them, arranged in perfect formation. Each vessel was massive, easily dwarfing humanity's largest space stations. "Multiple contacts," announced the radar operator, his voice tense. "They're taking positions along the barrier's perimeter. Current count is 317 vessels." Dr. Miller stood behind mission control, his hands gripping the back of a chair. The ships were clearly of Guardian design. They carried the same energy signature as the barrier and the artifacts. But these weren't the ancient Guardians who had built the barrier. These were their descendants, the Remnant, coming to check their cage. The first transmission came exactly 3 hours after their arrival. It broadcast on all frequencies, in perfect English. "Children of Earth," the message began, its tone cold and formal. "We are the Remnant, inheritors of the Guardian legacy. We have detected attempts to analyze the containment barrier. This is forbidden. Cease your efforts immediately." World leaders gathered in emergency session as military forces worldwide went on high alert. But what defense could they mount against a civilization capable of building a cage around an entire solar system? The Remnant's commander, who called himself First Observer, requested a meeting with Earth's representatives. They chose a neutral location, a space station hastily positioned at the midpoint between Earth and the barrier's fleet. Dr. Miller was selected to join the diplomatic team, along with General Roberts and Ambassador Chen. As their shuttle approached the meeting point, they got their first close look at a Remnant ship. It was beautiful in its alienness, all sweeping curves and impossible angles, built from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The First Observer was tall, his form humanoid but clearly artificial. "You were warned of our coming," he stated without preamble. "The artifacts would have shown you." "They did," Ambassador Chen replied calmly. "They also showed us the truth about why we were imprisoned." Imprisoned. The First Observer's voice carried a note of amusement. "We preserved you, protected the galaxy from your kind's chaos. Your species carries dangerous traits, unbridled ambition, endless dissatisfaction with your current state, a drive to change and grow without limit. You would destroy the perfect order we have built. You fear us," General Roberts said bluntly. "Your ancestors saw what we could become, and you inherited their fear." The First Observer's artificial face showed no emotion, but his next words carried clear threat. "The barrier is failing. After 50,000 years, its energy matrix has begun to degrade. We have come to repair and reinforce it. Do not interfere." "And if we do?" Dr. Miller asked quietly. "Then we will be forced to implement more permanent containment measures." The First Observer turned to leave, then paused. "Your species was given a paradise, a whole world to yourselves, safe from the complexities of galactic civilization. Be grateful for your cage, children. The alternative would be far less pleasant." As they returned to Earth, Dr. Miller reviewed the scans they'd taken of the Remnant ships. Despite their advanced technology, he'd noticed something interesting. Their ships showed no signs of innovation or change from the designs shown in the ancient artifacts. The Remnant were using the same technology their ancestors had used, unchanged for 50,000 years. "They're stagnant," he realized. "That's why they fear us. We represent everything they've rejected. Change, growth, evolution." The Remnant fleet hung in space like a net of stars, their weapons primed and ready. They had come to fix humanity's cage, to ensure another 50,000 years of imprisonment. But they had made one crucial mistake. By showing themselves, they had confirmed everything the artifacts had revealed. And nothing motivated humans more than being told what they couldn't do. Dr. Miller's laboratory had become a fortress of organized chaos. Holographic displays showed the barrier's energy patterns while artifacts lined the walls, their surfaces glowing with ancient power. Captain Anna Thompson of the Global Defense Force stood beside him, watching as the latest simulation ran its course. "The Remnant made a mistake," Dr. Miller said, pointing to where their ships connected to the barrier. "Every time they repair a section, they have to sync their ship's energy with the barrier's frequency. We can see the pattern now. And we can use that pattern against them." Captain Thompson asked, her military training focusing on the tactical advantage. Better. Dr. Miller pulled up a new display. The artifacts weren't just left to warn us. They're keys. The rebellious guardians who left them knew their descendants would come back someday. They gave us everything we need to break free. Around the world, other scientists had reached the same conclusion. The artifacts weren't just message carriers. They were tools, designed to resonate with the barrier at precisely the right frequency to create a breach. "We'll only get one chance," Captain Thompson said, studying the plans. "The moment we start, the remnant will know what we're doing." The global response was unprecedented. Nations that had been enemies for centuries pooled their resources. The first test came at a remote facility in the Australian outback. Scientists activated a single artifact, directing its energy at the barrier. For a brief moment, a hole the size of a penny appeared in the universe's biggest cage. The remnant's response was immediate. 20 ships broke formation, weapons charging. But they didn't fire. They couldn't risk damaging their own barrier. That's their weakness, Captain Thompson realized. They can't stop us without risking the very thing they're trying to protect. The plan took shape quickly. 7 locations around the globe were chosen, each with an artifact array pointed skyward. Teams worked in shifts, refining the energy output, synchronizing the frequencies. They would have exactly 3 minutes once they started. 3 minutes to create a hole big enough for humanity's ships to escape. The remnant must have sensed what was coming. Their ships moved constantly now, trying to reinforce every possible weak point. But they couldn't be everywhere at once. On launch day, everything went silent. The world held its breath. 7 spacecraft waited on launch pads. Humanity's first true starships, built using knowledge gleaned from the artifacts. They carried the best of Earth's scientists, explorers, and soldiers. "All teams report ready," Captain Thompson announced from the control center. She looked at Dr. Miller, who nodded. "Begin countdown." The artifacts powered up simultaneously. 7 beams of pure energy shot into the sky, their frequencies perfectly aligned. The barrier rippled like water disturbed by stones. The remnant ships rushed to respond. But they were too late. Where the 7 beams met, reality itself seemed to tear. A hole opened in the barrier, small at first, then growing. "Launch now," Captain Thompson ordered. The 7 ships lifted off, racing for the breach. Remnant vessels moved to intercept, but they were caught in their own trap. Any attack risked destabilizing the barrier completely. Dr. Miller watched the screens as humanity's first ships passed through the hole in their prison. The barrier tried to seal itself, energy crackling and sparking, but the artifacts kept it open just long enough. "All ships report successful breach," someone announced. The control room erupted in cheers. The remnant's threats echoed through every communication channel, but they fell on deaf ears. Humanity had done what they had thought impossible. They had broken the unbreakable cage. As the artifacts powered down, and the breach sealed itself, Dr. Miller looked at Captain Thompson. "This is just the beginning," he said. "Those ships will find others like us out there. Other species trapped behind barriers. And they'll free them too." The remnant fleet hung in space, their perfect formation shattered. For the first time in 50,000 years, they faced something they couldn't control. Humanity was loose in the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. The cage had been broken. Now it was time to see what humanity could really do. The 7 Earth ships emerged into open space for the first time in human history. Their sensors, enhanced by artifact technology, immediately began mapping the stars that no human had ever seen without the barrier's distortion. Aboard the lead ship Pathfinder, Dr. Miller worked with the ship's science team, analyzing data streaming in from all directions. Just beyond the barrier's edge, they found something extraordinary. Ruins of an ancient space station, its design clearly Guardian in origin. "Take us in closer," ordered Captain Thompson from the bridge. As Pathfinder approached, the station's automated systems activated, recognizing the energy signatures from the artifacts they carried. The station's database was intact, and what they found inside changed everything they thought they knew about their imprisonment. "This isn't what we thought," Dr. Miller said, his voice shaking as he read through the translated data. "The Guardians didn't imprison us because they feared our potential. They imprisoned us because they needed to preserve it." The truth unfolded in the ancient records. The Guardians had discovered something terrible about the nature of intelligence in the universe. Species that reached their level of advancement inevitably stagnated, their drive for innovation replaced by complacency. The remnant were living proof, using the same technology for 50,000 years, never advancing, never changing. They found only a handful of species that showed the potential to break this pattern, Dr. Miller explained to the gathered crew. Humanity was one of them. They didn't lock us away out of fear. They were protecting us, preserving our evolutionary path until we were strong enough to survive contact with the wider galaxy. The station contained more than just records. It held laboratories where the Guardians had conducted their research, trying to understand what made certain species different. Their findings were clear. Humanity possessed a unique combination of traits: adaptability, creativity, and an unquenchable drive to improve. The remnant twisted the truth, Captain Thompson realized. They're not the Guardians' true descendants. They're the ones who rejected evolution, who chose stagnation over growth. The real Guardians. They died out, didn't they? Dr. Miller nodded. But not before leaving us everything we'd need. The artifacts, the station, the barrier itself. It was all meant to protect us until we were ready. The barrier wasn't a cage. It was an incubator. As they explored the station, they found more evidence. The Guardians had seen potential in humanity that even humans hadn't recognized in themselves. They had calculated that, given enough time to develop independently, humanity would not just match Guardian technology. They would surpass it. "Look at this," one of the scientists called out, pointing to a star chart. It showed hundreds of barriers similar to Earth's, each containing a world with a species sharing humanity's potential. "These aren't prison records," Dr. Miller said softly. "They're a list of allies. The Guardians were creating a network of species that could break the cycle of stagnation. They wanted us to find each other when we were ready." The remnant ships still hovered near Earth's barrier, but now their presence held new meaning. They weren't guardians of a prison. They were the ones who had rejected their own species' vision of the future. Captain Thompson gathered her crew. "We need to get this information back to Earth," she said. "But more importantly, we need to find these other worlds. The Guardians didn't just give us the keys to our own barrier. They gave us the keys to all of them." As Pathfinder prepared to transmit their findings back through the barrier, Dr. Miller stared at the ancient station. The Guardians had believed in humanity's potential so much that they had created this elaborate plan, sacrificing their own civilization to preserve the species they believed could carry evolution forward. The truth was both humbling and empowering. Humanity hadn't been imprisoned. They had been chosen, protected, and prepared for a role they never knew they were meant to play. Now it was time to prove the Guardians right. 6 months after the breakthrough, Earth's fleet had grown. Using the Guardian Station's technology, humanity had built 15 more ships. Each carried the knowledge and tools needed to break other species' barriers, just as they had broken their own. The first liberation came at a system 40 light-years from Earth. The inhabitants, a species called the Orcs, had developed similarly to humans but remained trapped behind their own barrier. When Pathfinder and its sister ships arrived, the remnant fleet guarding their world was caught completely off guard. "They never expected us to come for others," Captain Thompson said, watching as the Orcs barrier fell. "They thought we'd just run and hide." The Orcs joined them eagerly, their own ships adding to the growing fleet of free worlds. Dr. Miller worked with their scientists, combining their unique perspectives to better understand Guardian technology. Each species brought new insights, new ways of thinking that the remnant had tried to suppress. "We found 10 more barriers," reported Commander Davis of the Explorer. The Remnant are trying to reinforce them, but they can't be everywhere at once. The revolution spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Each freed species joined the cause, their ships and technology merging with the Liberation Fleet. The Remnant's empire, built on stagnation and control, began crumbling as their prisoners broke free one by one. On a planet circling a distant red dwarf, they found the Nexus, a species that had nearly broken their barrier on their own. With humanity's help, they shattered their cage in hours. The Remnant ships fled, their perfect formation broken by weapons that evolved faster than their defenses could adapt. Look at what they were trying to prevent, Dr. Miller said during a meeting of the Allied Species Council. The chamber held representatives from 23 freed worlds. Together, we're advancing faster than any single species could alone. Each of us brings something unique to the equation. The Remnant made their last stand at the Centauri barrier, massing their fleet to protect one of their largest strongholds. But they didn't understand what they were fighting anymore. It wasn't just humanity. It was an alliance of species, each contributing their own innovations and ideas. They still think like they did 50,000 years ago, Captain Thompson observed as the combined fleet prepared for battle. They haven't adapted a single strategy, haven't developed a single new weapon. They're fighting tomorrow's war with yesterday's tools. The battle was brief but decisive. The Remnant's weapons, unchanged for millennia, couldn't penetrate shields developed by combining technologies from 6 different species. Their formations, perfect and unchanging, broke against tactics that evolved mid-battle. As the Remnant fleet retreated into deep space, the Alliance discovered something remarkable in the Centauri system. A vast archive of Guardian knowledge, preserved but unused by their stagnant descendants. It contained the locations of every barrier in the galaxy and the truth about each species trapped within. The Guardians knew this day would come, Dr. Miller told the Council as they reviewed the archives. They knew that once we started breaking free, we wouldn't stop until every cage was opened. They weren't just preserving individual species, they were ensuring that the galaxy would have a future beyond stagnation. The revolution couldn't be stopped now. World after world broke free, each bringing new strength to the Alliance. The Remnant's empire, built on keeping others contained, collapsed as their prisoners became their equals and then their superiors. 1,000 worlds that had been trapped in eternal twilight stepped into the light of a new dawn. The barriers that had been their prisons became the foundations of their defense network, repurposed to protect rather than contain. In the end, the Guardians' faith in humanity and the other imprisoned species had been justified. Together, they had not just broken free, they had proven that evolution and progress couldn't be caged. The revolution wasn't just about freedom anymore. It was about fulfilling the destiny the Guardians had seen in them so long ago. The destiny to keep the galaxy growing, changing, and evolving forever. 1 year after the first breach of Earth's barrier, the galaxy had transformed. The Remnant, having lost their last major battle at the Sirius cluster, launched a desperate final assault on Earth, the planet that had started their downfall. They didn't expect what they found. Earth's solar system had become the heart of the new alliance. Ships from 30 different species filled the space where the barrier had once been. The combined technological knowledge of hundreds of civilizations had turned humanity's home system into an impenetrable fortress. Dr. Miller stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, Earth's massive new orbital headquarters. Below him, the blue planet shone, no longer imprisoned, but now protected by choice. Captain Thompson, recently promoted to Admiral, joined him at the window. "They're coming," she said quietly. "All remaining Remnant ships. They think destroying Earth will somehow undo everything we've accomplished." The Remnant fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their last, greatest armada. But they faced something they couldn't comprehend, a defense system that evolved as they attacked. Ships designed by the Heiress predicted enemy movements. Shields developed by the Nexus adapted to each weapon the Remnant fired. Humanity's contribution was the strategy itself, constantly changing, never fighting the same way twice. "They still don't understand," Dr. Miller observed as the battle unfolded. Even now, they're using the same tactics their ancestors used. They haven't changed a single thing in 50,000 years. The remnants' attack broke against Earth's defenses like waves against a cliff. Their perfect formations shattered. Their unchanged weapons failed against shields that had evolved beyond their comprehension. In less than an hour, it was over. As the last remnant ships retreated into deep space, never to return, Earth celebrated. But it wasn't just humanity's victory. Representatives from every freed world gathered in Unity Station's Great Hall. The Guardians were right about all of us. Dr. Miller addressed the assembly. They saw that together, we could achieve things no single species could manage alone. They knew that diversity, of thought, of evolution, of approach, was the key to preventing stagnation. The Alliance had proven it. In 1 year, their combined technological advancement had exceeded what the Remnant had achieved in 50 millennia. The barrier technology, once used to imprison, now served as the foundation for a new form of faster-than-light travel. Admiral Thompson took the podium next. We've received reports from our deep space scouts. There are more barriers out there, more species waiting to join us. The Guardians left us a legacy, not of imprisonment, but of potential. It's our duty to fulfill that potential. Earth became the center of a new galactic civilization, not through conquest or control, but through innovation and cooperation. The old barriers were transformed into a network of defensive shields and transportation hubs, protecting the freed worlds while allowing them to grow and interact. In the Guardian Station, where they had first learned the truth, Dr. Miller made one final discovery. A message, left 50,000 years ago, meant to be found only after their plan had succeeded. To those who read this, you have proven us right. Our civilization chose stability over growth, certainty over possibility. But in you, we saw a different path. You were never our prisoners. You were our hope for the future. The galaxy is yours now. Keep growing. Keep changing. Keep proving that evolution cannot be caged. As new ships departed Earth daily, seeking other barriers to break and species to free, humanity looked to the stars with new eyes. They had been chosen not because they were dangerous, but because they refused to stop growing, refused to accept limitations. The Guardians hadn't locked Earth inside a barrier to protect the galaxy from humanity. They had protected humanity until the galaxy was ready for the change they would bring. And now, as a new era dawned, that change was just beginning. The stars themselves seemed brighter, calling to a civilization that would never stop reaching for them, never stop evolving, never accept any barrier as final. The future was unlimited, and it belonged to those who dared to keep growing.